So I'm going to show you how this works really quickly. I have a sign-in screen, and when I enter my email and password, it will save it on Firebase, and I'll be able to log in securely to this app. So I've entered my email and password. When I click sign in, it will go to the next welcome screen, and the login information is saved here in Firebase. So this makes it a secure login. So I'm going to show you how to do this today with Thunkable and Firebase. So I'm going to open up Thunkable. I'm going to log in. I'm going to use Thunkable X. And I'm also going to open up Firebase. You can just search for Firebase in Google. And you'll have to sign in. Once you're in Firebase, you're going to add a new project. And we call it login Firebase. And I'm also going to go into Thunkable, and I'm going to start a new app. I'm going to give it the same name so I remember it was Login Firebase. Now that I have Thunkable and Firebase set up, I'm going to start in Thunkable. I'm going to do this kind of a quick and easy way by dropping in rows and columns. So I'm going to start off with 4 rows. This will break my screen up into 4 pieces. Alright, I got in my 4 rows. I'm going to drop a column in on the top of the 3rd row. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because I want the items in here to be stacked instead of next to each other. So I'm going to drop a column in on top of this row. And if you look over here, you'll see that the column showed up underneath the row. And that is just the way I want it. So I'm going to start with a label at the top in row 4. And that should appear right in the middle. I'm going to have 2 text inputs in this column that I put on top of the row. So you'll see when I put in these 2 text inputs, they'll be stacked on top of each other, and that's just what I want. And then down in this 2nd row that I put in, I'm going to put in 2 buttons, and I want these buttons next to each other, not on top of each other. So I want them to appear just like that. And then I'm going to have 1 more button in the bottom. Let's start back at the top with this first label that we entered. And this first label, I'm just going to call it login screen. Kind of gives it the title so the user knows what's going on. And I want to make that maybe 30 font so that it's easy to read and we can see it's the title. The next text input here, I'm going to write enter email ID. And this one here, I'm going to write enter password. Alright, so we've called this enter email ID, we've called this enter password, or we've written that in as the hint. What I'd like to do is I'd like to rename this one. So instead of text input 1, I'm going to call this email input. This will make the coding easier later if you have these labeled. And this one I will call pass input. I just shortened password to pass. And we're going to go down here to these two buttons. So to make these buttons separated and to look nice, I'm going to drop a column in between them. Now that's a little bit too much space, so I'm going to edit that column a little bit. I want the width to be an absolute size. I'm going to try 20, and that looks good to me, so those buttons are a little bit separated. Alright, so with this button right here, we've made the width 5, we made the color blue, we have to select solid, and then the quarter radius is 20. It looks more like an oval. You could change that to 10, and then it's like a rectangle with rounded sides. It's just up to you how you want that button to appear. I'm going to do the same thing for the other one. Width 5, color blue, solid, and 10. So then we have our two buttons. They're a little bit clearer because they're separated with this column, and they have outlines. Let's rename these buttons. So this first button here, we're going to call that sign in. Oops. Sign in. I'll call it sign in button. And this one here. Actually, let's put that name right on the button. Go right, sign in. So the user will click this button right here to sign in. And this button over here will be sign up. So if they haven't used this system before, they'll have to hit this button to sign up. And again, I want to put that text on the button, but I also want to rename the button. Again, this will make it easier when you start putting in the blocks of code. And we have one more button down below here, and we're just going to call that reset password. We'll write reset password on the button. And then I'll probably rename it reset pass, just shorten password so it's a little bit easier. And I might put button on there too. It just makes it really clear for me when I'm doing it later. And I want to make this button look like the other two up here. So I am going to give it a border of 5. Stick with that blue color. Solid line 10. Alright, so our screen's looking pretty good. Let's add another screen. This is going to be screen 2. So if the person's able to log in here, we'll go to screen 2. And I want to have a label there that says welcome. That looks real small, so I'm just going to up that font size. And let's give it a nice color. We'll go with green. Alright, we have our second screen set up. Let's go back to screen number 1. So we have all our visible components created on this login screen, but we need to put some other components on here as well. We're going to put real-time DB, real-time database. This helps us connect to Firebase. And we're going to put on authentication, this sign-in. This is going to help us connect to Firebase. And we're going to put on local storage as well. This will help us store some data as well. So we have local storage, real-time DB1, and sign-in 1. We have them all here on screen number 1. Done as we put these invisible components onto our screen. We have local storage, we have real-time database, and we have sign-in. So if you click on real-time database and go to Firebase Settings, there's some information that we're going to have to put in here. So our app name is Login Firebase, and if we scroll down, we see that we need an API key and a database URL. So to get the API key, I go to Firebase, and I click on this. I click on this gear wheel right here, and Project Settings, and that's going to be my API key right there. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste that into Thunkable. Then I also need my database URL. So again, I'm going to go back to Firebase. I'm going to go to my project overview, and I'm going to click on this button right here. This button right here will have lots of information. What we need is the database URL. So I'm going to copy that without the quotations, and I'm going to paste that into Thunkable. Alright, and this way when our app calls to Firebase, they'll be able to communicate. Alright, I'm in Firebase and I've clicked on Project Overview. I go down to Authentication and Sign-in Method. I want to enable email and password sign-in. So I'm going to switch that to enable and save that. What I'm going to do for the enter password text input is I'm going to go into advanced, and I'm going to scroll down, and I want to set that as secure text entry because that's a password and we don't want other people to see it. We'll do the blocks next. So we're going to have 3 groups of blocks. The first one is going to be when sign up button clicked. So I go into sign up button, I pull out when sign up button clicked. We need an if do block, and I'm actually going to add an else to that. So if do else do this, and I do that by hitting this gear right here. So I'm going to pull out a equals from logic, and I'm going to pull out a or from logic, and I'm going to say if email input, if email input get text is equal to, I'm going to pull null out of logic. If email input text is equal to null, or password input text is equal to null, and I think I can duplicate this. If they didn't write in any email input text and they didn't write any password input text, then we want to change that login tab at the top. That was label 1. And I'm going to set that text to please enter your email and password. Else, we're going to use a block from sign-in. So that invisible component sign-in that we put in there, that has some functions as well. We are going to need to get the email and the password. So that's email input, get text, and pass input, get text. Then we want another if, do, else block. That's going to come underneath here, and I'm going to add an else to it. So what I'm going to say here is if there is an error, then I want to set the label 1 text to error. So that we know why there's an error. It'll play an error message of the label at the top. And then from the label 1 again, if there isn't an error, we want to say verification sent to your email. I'm just going to say email verification sent. All right, and that's our first block. The next block of code is going to be what to do when the sign-in button is clicked. So in sign-in button, I'm going to pull out when sign-in button clicked. And I'm going to scroll down a little bit. But actually some of these are going to be the same. So if they don't enter an email or text, that's going to be the same. I'm going to put this control block back in here. And if this, do that, and I'm going to add an else to it. So if they don't enter an email or a password, again, we want to change that login tab to please enter your email and password. That will stay the same. And then else, we're going to call the sign-in function. Sign-in 1, we want this to be sign in, not sign up. And we're going to need to get the email and the password, so the email input. Oops, wrong block. Email input get text, pass input get text. And we're going to use a block very similar to this one, so I'm going to duplicate this one and I'm going to bring it down. So I'm going to add an else if to this. So it's going to be if, else. So if there's an error, label 1 text to error, that will be the same. And then we need if email is verified is false. So we're going to go to logic and pull out this equals. And we're going to say if email is verified and then false. So if they haven't verified their email, we are going to change the tab to say, please verify your email first. I think I'm going to duplicate this right here. It just says, please verify email. And the else We're going to use local storage to save the user ID. So local storage is here. And for the key, we write user ID. And the value is user ID. And then what we want to do is we want to navigate to screen 2 where there is a welcome message. And that was the block of code for the sign in button. We have one more block of code, and that's going to be when they hit the reset password. And we're going to start with when reset button password clicked. And we want to put in a control block if do. Equals no. And if email input get text is not entered, we want to set the label 1 to please enter email ID. Now we'll add an else to this block right here. And then we want to use the sign in block. So if they don't, up here it's if they don't enter their email, then we want to change the label 1 text to please enter ID. Else we'll call the sign in block. And the email, we're going to get that from the email input. And we'll need one more if do block up in control. If there's an error, then we want to set label 1 to that error. So I'm just going to grab this, duplicate it, move this down here, get rid of that. We want to display the error so they know why the error is. And I want to add an else to this block. If there is no error, what we want to do is we want to make label 1 say password reset link sent to email. So I'm going to grab a text block. Alright, and that should be the code, so now we can test it out.